Many, many miles east of nowhere lies the amazing land of Oz, a magnificent empire created in the mind of a man who wrote a great book about it. Like wildfire in the wheat field, the fabulous tale of the Wizard of Oz spread from town to city to nation to the entire
world. To see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. We hear he is the Wizard of Wiz, if ever a Wiz there was. If ever a Wiz there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because of the wonderful things he does. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
After a little thought, go away and come back tomorrow. Not arouse the wrath of the great and powerful Oz. Do you presume to criticize the great Oz? You ungrateful creatures, think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now. Oh, the great Oz has spoken. Oh. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great Oz has spoken.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
You are? I don't believe you.
No, I'm afraid it's true. There's no other wizard except me. You humbug! Yes, it's exactly so. I'm a humbug.
Oh, you're a very bad man.
Oh, no, my dear. I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard.
Scotland voting on whether to leave the United Kingdom and need in these turbulent times sensible questions and clear answers. It's surely the first major poll, just one poll mind you, showing the Yes to Independence campaign in Scotland pulling ahead, potentially a huge crisis for the British state. The biggest card played by the Unionist side has been the threat that an independent Scotland could not keep the pound. Has that horribly backfired? Well, the man who made the threat, the Chancellor George Osborne, joins me today. But we'll also be talking about the cost of taking the war to the so-called Islamic State, a conflict we're now told could last 3 years or more.
Thank you. Good morning. Supporters of Scottish independence claim they have the momentum with less than 2 weeks to go before the referendum. A poll by YouGov for the Sunday Times suggests that a narrow majority of Scottish voters is now in favour of leaving the UK. It's the first time a mainstream poll has put the Yes campaign ahead, although the figures don't include undecided voters. Another poll gives the No campaign a narrow lead. Our Scotland correspondent James Cook reports.
Campaigners for a yes vote, enjoying their moment in the sun, mocking their rivals. For decades, Scottish independence had a minority following, but now its supporters say they're on a roll, dancing towards victory.
The beauty of the Yes campaign is that it's got a momentum of its own. You know, it's a diverse, grassroots, community-based campaign where, you know, there are different groups in every single sector of society campaigning for a yes vote, and it's a momentum that is, I think, unstoppable.
And there is some evidence of momentum. A poll by YouGov for the Sunday Times suggests a yes vote by the narrowest of margins, 51% to 49%, when don't knows are excluded. It is the first poll of this campaign to predict the breakup of the United Kingdom. This poll has caused a splash, and if it were just the one poll, then perhaps that would be all that it caused. In fact, though, the underlying trend is the same as in other recent surveys. Movement towards a yes vote. Squeaky bomb time.
And Scotland completely dominates the front pages of the serious papers. There's the Sunday Times we've seen already. Yes vote leads in Scots poll. We'll talk about that in a moment. Ed Miliband is saying that we will put guards, he says, on the Scottish border. There is going to have to be a guarded frontier with Scotland, he claims. The Observer, on the other hand, says that after this shock poll, there are new talks on the future of the whole United Kingdom going to be announced within the next few days. I'll talk to the Chancellor George Osborne about that. And finally, the Independent there, Scotland, the independence crisis. A rare exception is the Sunday Telegraph, which leads on the MPs to get 10% pay rise. I was just discussing with Francis O'Grady.
I will. I think most people who believe in the union would have been shocked by today's Sunday Times headline that the vote now shows a pro-majority for the Scots, but also, I mean, an existential threat for Great Britain, for the Union in its backyard, but also around the world, because here you have launch an all-out blitz on the ISIS jihadis.
So these are very turbulent times. It is just one poll, but also the other polls have been showing a rise in the yes.
Well, everybody's saying knife edge.
Yeah, and it is. And I mean, I never thought that the no vote was in the bag. I don't think Alistair Darling ever thought that either. So I think what this does for me is just, it makes me want to go and campaign in Scotland and to ring people up and to say, look, Scotland as a nation is crucial to us in the United Kingdom. It's crucial to everything in my history, you know, whether it's the TUC, whether, well, the Labour Party, but actually it's not about self-interest of the political parties. Otherwise, David Cameron would be campaigning for a yes vote. So, you know, if you look at the great institutions, the Post Office, the BBC, dare I say, the National Health Service, it's all about Scotland as a nation being in a wider community. And I loved Will Hutton's phrase, because sometimes, as a famous American politician said, you campaign in poetry and govern in prose. So you need to campaign in poetry. And Will Hutton says, if there was a yes vote, absurdly there would be two countries on the same small island that have so much in common. If Britain can't find a way of sticking together, it is the death of the liberal Enlightenment before the atavistic forces of nationalism and ethnicity. And he says it's a dark omen for the 21st century.
A lot of Scots would say...
It's not progressive.
A lot of Scots would say, all we want is a slightly more left-of-centre country. We want to protect our health service and our welfare state, and we can't get that anymore through Westminster because of what's going on in Westminster politics.
Well, of course, the fact that the SNP are in power is because we have devolved so much to Scotland. Now, that's the issue, I think. I think somebody said that you could sum up this campaign by saying the yes vote is saying vote yes and nothing will change. The no vote is saying vote no and everything will change. We've never actually put any text to that. We've never said, well, what would change if you vote no?
That's got to happen.
Yes, we do need to go further.
From an outsider's point of view and looking as a foreign correspondent in, one question to you would be, has the Better Together campaign lacked imagination, as the papers have been arguing? Has there not been quite enough said about all the virtues of staying within the Union? And also this business about Ed Miliband, your party leader, saying that there are going to be troops on the border if it comes to that. Is that the case?
Well, what Ed Miliband is doing is campaigning in Scotland and campaigning for a yes, for a no vote, and saying that the progressive future of this country depends on us staying together. And you can save the NHS and all these other things, but the way you vote in this referendum isn't like a general election. It's not, oh, you know, vote for one party now and you can reverse it in 4 or 5 years' time. And I think the comment about the border is just saying, well, look, you know,
there may be two different immigration policies.
Eddie's there saying, look, let's keep Scotland as part of the United Kingdom. That's what he's putting all his energy into. But questions are raised as to what would happen.
I think Labour are disputing the way this story's been...
Yes, they say it wasn't, bill on Friday, when the bedroom tax, which is probably the most vicious piece of legislation I've ever seen, became the subject of a big vote. Incidentally, only a third of Scottish Nats turned up to vote in this, but leaving that aside, 70 Tory MPs refused to come in on a 3-line whip, and that's extraordinary. And you've got this piece in the Mail on Sunday where Jacob Rees-Mogg, good old Jacob, you know, we're months away from an election. This is the time to be saying this government's done good things. Talk about damned with faint praise. In many ways, the current government has been highly successful, says a Tory MP standing for re-election. It's fun to watch in a sense, because this is a kind of inverted version of what happened to Labour in the early 80s with the SDP Liberal Alliance.
He wants Nigel Farage to be the Deputy Prime Minister.
To be the Deputy Prime Minister, for goodness sake.
I mean, talking about France and all of this as well, I mean, Marine Le Pen, Nigel Farage, obviously they all did well in the MEP elections, in the European elections. But do you think this is a starter? Is that possible here in England, in Britain?
Look, this is an argument on the right of British politics. You've got the Conservative Party and the Conservative Party circa 1986, which is what UKIP is, and a view of nostalgia to go. I mean, anyone who thinks that this is a workers' party.
On the right and, in a sense, on the left in Scotland, there is a generalised revolt against politics as usual going on, isn't there?
Yes, I think that's true, and it's happening in many other countries around the world, and there's a whole series of issues under that. But I think in terms of thinking that UKIP are the answer to this, when they are so obviously a version of conservatism that many Conservatives find attractive, but for us on the left.
Scottish Yes campaign now ahead, meltdown for the UK, a European crisis for the Tory party, and the small matter of making war on the Islamic State with the costs of that. I'm joined by the Chancellor, George Osborne, and I think it is possible we will find something to talk about. Welcome, Chancellor. You were the architect, partly, of the strategy of saying that you can't have the pound to the Scots. That has horribly backfired, hasn't it?
Well, no, I don't accept that. Look, this country faces a very, very big choice. Scotland faces a very big choice, and if people were in any doubt that they can stay at home, they don't need to go out to the polls and vote no to avoid separation, they won't be in that doubt today. And they should also be in no doubt about the consequences of this decision, one of which is that Scotland would not be sharing the pound as an independent country with the rest of the United Kingdom if the separatists win the vote. People in Scotland simply don't believe that. They think that if there's a yes vote, there will be sensible negotiations, that you as Chancellor will sit down with Alex Salmond, whoever it is, John Swinney, and discuss the future fiscal and financial arrangements, and that because sharing the pound is good for British industry, south of the border and north of the border Scottish industry, and is the kind of common sense approach, eventually that will happen, whatever you say now. Well, that's just not true. Why not? The truth is that sharing the pound would not be good for Scotland, it would not be good for the rest of the United Kingdom. But they share the pound now. That's because we're part of one country with one central bank and one integrated and united economy. If you vote no, if you vote to leave the United Kingdom, you are leaving those arrangements. I mean, it's a bit like a couple getting divorced, but saying we're going to keep the current account and we're going to keep the joint mortgage. That's not what happens in divorce, and it's not what happens in separation. And I think it brings us back to this point, which is this is a very big decision for Scotland, and the people of Scotland need to be in possession of all the facts. And on the currency, you've personalised it to me, and of course, as Chancellor Exchequer, I've been very straight with people about the choices they face. But of course, what I've said has been echoed by the Labour Party, by economists, by central bankers. You know, this is the view of many, many people, that a currency union is just simply not going to happen, and it is not going to happen. So if Alex Salmond wins the vote, which you hope won't happen, and he then comes to you and says, let's sit down and talk, you say no talks, no discussion about the pound? Well, every possible combination of government that you could imagine at Westminster has made it clear that there will not be a currency union, and it is really for Alex Salmond in the next 10 days to explain what currency Scotland would use if it's separated from the rest of the United Kingdom. I think... You see, he says, hold on a second, the pound belongs to us as much as it belongs to George Osborne or anyone else in England. It's a joint currency. We have joint arrangements up to now. There is no reason at all why we couldn't carry on some joint arrangements. We could have a voice in the Bank of England or whatever. And that is the common sense. That is what will keep business and prosperity flowing across the border, which is what everybody wants. But it is not the common sense arrangement, because it would not be good for the people of Scotland. They would have voted to be independent, voted to separate from the rest of the UK, and then putting all the economic decisions in the hands of their neighbouring country. And it wouldn't be good for the rest of the UK, because we would be standing behind, for example, the banks and the financial system and the economy of another country. You know, we didn't join as a country the euro because we didn't want to be part of these currency arrangements. So, you know, Alex Salmond is not really telling people, you know, the straight truth about what currency Scotland will use if Scotland separates from the rest of the UK. And, you know, he's conceded. I mean, the very fact he says, look, I accept there's plan A, and people say that's not going to work, here are 3 plan Bs, suggests to me a man who doesn't have a plan on one of the most fundamental issues, and there are other fundamental issues for Scotland if it were to separate from the UK, but that's a pretty fundamental one. What is actually going to be the notes that I pull out of my wallet or my purse and the coins I have in my pocket if this country is independent or separate from the rest of the UK? And this is not simply pique from Westminster saying we're cross with you, we're going to punish you. Because that's, again, to a lot of Scots, that's what it sounds like. But it's not... Look, as I'm an Englishman, I passionately want Scotland to stay in the United Kingdom. I think the arrangements we have at the moment work well, but can be improved upon. I think the arrangements with the pound work well. So we've got arrangements that can work. And I'm the one, and all the Labour politicians and independent economists are all the people saying it's not going to work if you think you can share the pound after separation. And I
so
think
no ifs, no buts. With independence, no pound.
No ifs, no buts. We will not share the pound if Scotland separates from the rest of the UK.
Can we move on to another story in today's papers related to that, which is a suggestion that there are going to be some kind of all-party talks if there's a no vote on new arrangements for Scotland, further devolution, could be fiscal devolution, I don't, but the individual parties have had subtly different views on this up to now, and there hasn't been a single proposition, as it were, before the Scots on what would happen with a no vote. Will there be such a proposal on the table before the referendum actually takes place?
Yeah, it's clear that Scotland wants more control over the decisions that affect Scotland. I mean, that's been clear from both sides of this debate in Scotland, and we propose to deliver on that. So you will see in the next few days a plan of action to give more powers to Scotland, more tax powers, more spending powers, more plans and powers over the welfare state. And that will be put into effect. The timetable for delivering that will be put into effect the moment there is a no vote in the referendum. The clock will be ticking for delivering those powers, and then Scotland will have the best of both worlds. They will both avoid the risks of separation but have more control over their own destiny, which is where I think many Scots want to be.
And this is a plan agreed by all the main Westminster parties or not?
Yes, so we've been discussing with the other main political parties in Westminster, with the Labour Party, with the Liberal Democrats. We are working on that plan of action. We will set it out in the next few days. People should know that if they vote no, they are voting for more devolution, more powers for Scotland, without the risks of separation and all the uncertainty.
We're talking about more tax-raising powers?
More tax-raising powers.
Going as far as fiscal autonomy?
Well, much greater fiscal autonomy. I mean, let's wait and see the proposal we have in the next few days, but much greater power to control tax rates, more control over public expenditure, more control over welfare rates, and a host of other changes, all of which I think satisfy a Scottish demand that decisions that affect Scotland are taken in Scotland without the risks of separation, and I think that is the best of both worlds.
Alex Salmond scored a bit of a blow when he attacked Alistair Darling for the lack of job-creating powers for the Scottish Parliament. Would that also be included in this agreement?
Well, absolutely. Economic powers to make decisions about your economy, and of course things like tax rates do affect whether you can attract jobs to the country. So, of course, you know, the Scottish economy is growing, but I would like to see it grow still further, and I want to make sure that the Scottish people make their own decisions about how they achieve that.
If, after all of this, there is a yes vote, are we going to see major resignations from government?
This is not about individuals. I think it's really important that we confront this. People need to know when they vote on the 18th. They are not voting about a single politician or a single policy. This is not a protest vote. This is a once-in-a-lifetime vote. This is not a vote about the next 5 years. It's a vote about the next 300 years. It couldn't be a bigger decision for the people of Scotland. And the message from the United Kingdom is we want you to stay. It's just that some people think it would be such a big moment that it would destroy the UK government as well. Well, look, as I say, we're campaigning for a no vote, and I believe we will see a no vote in Scotland. But this is not about the future of the British government in Westminster. This is not about the future of myself or David Cameron or anyone else. This is not. People need to understand. This You're not giving the Yes campaign as a hostage or two. Well, this is not a protest vote. I know Alex Salmond doesn't actually want to talk about the currency, about the big economic questions. He wants to turn it into a protest vote about Westminster. But it is not a protest vote. It is a once-in-a-lifetime vote about the future of Scotland. It would be a huge triumph for Alex Salmond if he can pull this off, however. I mean, he's always said he can do it, and people like yourself and a lot of people in Westminster have always been highly sceptical. Part of the reason, if he does pull it off, is that the pro-union campaign has been negative, and there's been so much energy and enthusiasm on the yes side, mainly because they want a slightly more socially just Scotland than they can get at the moment. Well, I dispute, that, because I see in the Better Together campaign, a campaign that's put forward a very positive vision of Scotland within the United Kingdom, so getting the better of both worlds. Well, actually, I think people do understand, and maybe these opinion polls will focus people's attention on the real choice they have to make on the 18th. People need to know that if you go to the polls and vote yes, you're voting to separate Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom, and the way to keep Scotland in the UK with more powers for Scotland is to vote no.
So this is an existential threat to the British state, as we were saying earlier on. The other existential threat we talked about earlier on was ISIS, right? There's been a lot of criticism, you heard it from Francis O'Grady just now, about the MP's 10% pay rise. What's your view on that?
Well, I find myself in rare agreement with Francis. You know, I don't think it's acceptable at a time when there's continuing pay restraint in the public sector that MPs would receive such a big increase, but this is not the final verdict, this is not the final report. There will be a report after the election, and I think that's when we're going to have to tackle this issue.
We have a recovery clearly going on, but for a lot of people it is a kind of rather grim recovery. Their wages are not going up. What can you do to answer Francis O'Grady's points about the minimum wage and indeed the living wage, two separate positions there?
Well, the minimum wage is going up above inflation this year. That's an example of what you can afford to do when your economy starts to grow, and I guess points to a bigger picture argument, which is the people in a country are only as rich as the country, and if your economy is shrinking and failing, then people get poorer, as they did in the Great Recession, and as your economy starts to grow, the people in that country start to get richer. And we say, no one's benefiting from the recession. Indeed, you started the whole programme by saying, unless you own a house in London or something. Actually, there are 1.8 million people in jobs who didn't have those jobs beforehand. So that's real economic security for families, real progress in our economic situation.
Thanks, Andrew. The Chancellor of the Exchequer has repeated his warning that no government at Westminster would agree to a currency union if Scotland votes for independence in the referendum next week. No ifs, no buts, we will not share the pound, George Osborne told this programme. He was speaking as a new opinion poll in the Sunday Times suggested that the Yes campaign has a narrow lead. It's the first poll to put the independence movement ahead.
Over the bedroom tax was a big moment for the coalition, wasn't it, last week?
Well, it was actually a private member's bill, and we'll see what happens. But look, there is a disagreement about whether we need to control welfare bills in this country, whether this is the right priority for Britain to be spending more and more money on welfare. I don't think it is. I'd much rather have the money spent on the investment in our education and our infrastructure, and indeed in lowering taxes. So this is going to be one of those issues that come up and where probably Alan and I won't agree.
Yeah, but the question is whether the coalition's over or whether the bedroom tax is over.
Well, the coalition will be over when there's a general election, and then there will be a very clear choice, and I think people should focus on whether they want a majority Labour or Conservative government, whether they want Ed Miliband in Downing Street or David Cameron. I think that will be the choice as people face the election. I'm confident we can win that contest.
Do either of you think, again in the context of a yes vote in Scotland, that the parliamentary election could be delayed? Because there's been a lot of talk about that.
Well, I don't want to speculate about, as I say, the outcome of a yes vote, because in any respect, that doesn't mean I agree with the premise of your question at all. I just think if you get into all the consequences of it, you're just reminded how big a decision this is for the people of Scotland and for the people of the UK, and the message from Alan and I to English people is we want you to stay.
To Scottish people as well.
Me and George are on the same side about say no to separation, and also say no to a 10% pay rise for MPs.
That too. Well, let's try and find an area of disagreement. You are kind of playing footsie a bit with the Liberal Democrats in that bedroom tax vote. Well, not you personally. I don't know, maybe you are. I have no idea. But there is the beginnings of kind of soft, gentle rapprochement, like two spiny anteaters trying to make love, as it were, between yourself and the Liberal Democrats.
Well, it was a Lib Dem who was pushing the private members bill. But I think where George and I might agree on this, I found it incredible, actually, that the Liberal Democrats who sit in the government and endorse the policy then come marching through the lobbies to oppose it, which is essentially what happened. I mean, in a way, if you're in a coalition government and you're doing these things, I think the bedroom tax is an absolute disaster. But if you're doing these things, you go out and defend them. Yeah. You don't try and have it both ways.
Yeah.
I agree on that. And they never raised it.
No,
I know it's an outbreak of agreement from two West London boys